present
Sure.
your lesson today. What are your objectives?
So today, it's the beginning of the semester, so we're starting sort of a new unit about activities, what people like to do in their free time. So today we will be reviewing some of the ones we know, and then hopefully incorporating them in a new story that we're going to make. We're going to make a new character, and that character will do some of these activities.
Okay. So what will I be observing today?
So the first thing we'll have is a little warm-up, and then they'll be doing some free reading, where they write vocabulary words on the board, and then we go over what they mean. And then after that, we'll review activities that they may or may not know already. We've been using a lot of activity words over the last semester, so we're just going to kind of formalize that they know some of those. And then we will start a new character where they decide what the character is, and we'll launch into a story.
Okay. I've been in this class a few times, but just for review, what sorts of students do you have in here?
So it's a pretty homogeneous class. I mostly have, it's more girls than boys. There are no English learners. It's a pretty homogeneous class.
No special ed kids?
No special ed kids. I do have one Dreamcatcher kid. So an underrepresented minority, but he is perfectly fluent in English.
Okay. Is there any student that you want me to keep an eye on?
So there's a few interesting characters. Isaac is interesting. He likes to kind of be a second teacher. And like, what would you be looking for?
Just sort of anything you want me to focus on.
Oh, okay.
Any concern, any way I can support you in helping.
Okay,
them.
so Isaac would be one. Another one might be Max. Oh, no, Annalise. She's a redhead.
Where does she sit?
She sits back here.
Okay.
In this area.
And then do you want me to look just to see what triggers them to kind of lose focus, or
what triggers them, and then maybe how I respond to them, and how I could be more effective, because I haven't quite found the magic bullet with her yet.
Okay, got it. Great. How do you plan to assess students' learning today with the activities you've planned?
Oh, so at the end of the period, we'll have a little mini quiz. These little, I call them petit quizzes. They're like on a quarter sheet. And I ask 5 comprehension questions about what was said in class today. And it can be part of the story, or it can be something else.
Okay.
And it's just like a quick exit ticket type activity that I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is there anything specific during your lesson that you want me to give you feedback on afterwards or look for?
Yeah. So the kids really get engaged with the story, and sometimes I don't really know how to pull them back a little bit and kind of, they get so focused on the story that we sort of forget that we're learning French, which is great, but sometimes the story sort of takes center stage. The details of the story take center stage over the French, and if you have any feedback on how to keep them channeled, that would be great.
Okay. Is there anything else?
No, I hope you have fun.
All right. Well, thanks so much.
Sure.
Ça va bien, merci. À vous, Grace?
Ça va très bien, merci. Nous avons un nouveau student service. So Stella is now called Mara. Et regardez, c'est le jardin de Monet. Oui, Monet? Ok, très bien. Très bien, merci, mademoiselle. I'm going to put it over here.
Eddie, now it's broken. It's not my fault.
Okay, so we're going to do a little warm-up today. Remember how we got our cahiers and you did the bingo in that page?
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to do this one. It's our first one. Okay, all you have to do is match the words. Oui? Max? c'est mercredi. Très bien, classe. Mercredi le 10 janvier 2018. Très bien. Il y a un anniversaire?
Oh, my friend Isabella.
Non. En français.
Um,
How do you say my friend?
Mon ami.
Mon ami. Isabelle a un anniversaire aujourd'hui?
Oui.
Quel âge a Isabelle? Elle a 13. Oh, elle a 13 ans. Très bien. Oh, ton amie est une teenager. Evie.
Mon
Evie.
amie Natalie
Ton amie Nathalie?
had her birthday.
Ah oui, Nathalie.
Carol.
Carol. Hier. C'était l'anniversaire de Nathalie. Oui, le 9. Hier, c'était le 9. Oui.
I need to say this first, and I'll say it. No. Okay, you'll understand. Okay, so my birthday's in the summer, but I'm away all summer, so I celebrate it in the winter on my half birthday. So how do I say my half birthday is on? Is it Saturday?
Mon demi. Remember demi? Remember Isabelle was 8 and a half? Mon demi, oui. Anniversaire. Et samedi? Ton demi-anniversaire est samedi?
Maybe Sunday. I don't know.
Oh, peut-être.
So, really well done,
Thank
Madam
you.
Modica. I really enjoyed being in the class. And what I noticed most was the amount of engagement among the students. Even the two students that you mentioned earlier that you wanted me to keep an eye on were extremely engaged. Annalise and Isaac were both very, very much engaged in the lesson and did pretty much, every step of your instructions, even though Annalise needed a couple of reminders, but they were really engaged, as were all the students. So I do have a few follow-up questions for you, and then you can definitely ask me questions. The question was, did the lesson go as planned?
Yeah, for the most part. Yeah, I did everything. I sort of hit everything I wanted to get to today.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt pretty good about that. Yeah, part of the story, we didn't get a lot of the details that I wanted yet, but I wanted to get to the point where we had a problem. So I kind of rushed through that a little bit, and then we go back and do some details later.
Mm-hmm.
But otherwise, yeah.
Did you make any adjustments to the lesson?
So just that, I guess. I skipped some of the details to get to a breaking point.
Mm-hmm.
As one of the kids told me, I left a cliffhanger to give them something to do tomorrow to talk about the problem, the conflict in our story.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, I pretty much stuck to what I was planning on doing. So yeah.
Okay. You said that initially you wanted them. One of the outcomes was for them to understand activities and to be able to say words in French. Do you feel like you achieved that goal?
I think partially. So the idea wasn't that they would leave sort of knowing all the activities, but it was more to remind them of how many activities they do know and kind of put them in one place. Because the way I teach, I don't do like thematic units so much, so I don't give them a vocabulary list with all the activities. So this was kind of to help them remember that they know a lot of activities and put them in one place and make them make that connection in their brain. So in that way, I do think I achieved the goal. I do think they need more repetition and more work with them.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the goal wasn't that they would leave here knowing them all. The goal would be that they would leave here aware that they know more than they think they know. Does that make sense?
Yes. Where do you want to go from here when it comes to this goal of vocabulary around activities?
Well, I want to get to the place where they'll be able to say, what they enjoy doing and how often they do it and how if they do it well or badly or if kind of like that. So be able to discuss with other people in French things that they enjoy doing or things that other people enjoy doing and be able to ask questions about it and sort of have a little conversation about free time activities, things that you can do when you're not at school.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I have a few questions about the assessment at the end.
Uh-huh.
How do you decide what questions to put on the assessment?
The questions on the assessment at the end are just, I don't really know. Based on what was said in class, I just, it's not a gotcha kind of thing. It's just like, this is, I think about everything that was said in class, and I just ask them questions about it to just make sure that they were paying attention and understanding. The difficulty in teaching in mostly in the target language is you don't always know if kids are understanding what you're saying because they will just nod. And even though I give them a chance to always let me know when they don't understand with a silent gesture, they don't always do that. And so I'm hoping that by asking questions about what happened, even if they didn't understand, and once we go over the questions, maybe it'll trigger something. So it's not really a graded thing. It's just more to keep them honest, so to speak, to just sort of, that they know that they're going to be asked questions about it. So it keeps them, I'm hoping it'll keep them a little more engaged and letting me know when they don't understand.
Okay. Are the questions all related to your goal of activities, or are they general to just focus on anything that came up?
They're just
Or
on
attention?
anything that came up.
Okay.
Sometimes I'll do them focused more on that thing. So, for example, yesterday with my 1Bs, we're doing more like restaurant type vocabulary. And so there were a couple questions in there about some of the words that I really wanted to make sure that they knew, like the French word for menu and the Czech.
Okay.
Because those are kind of tricky.
So how will you specifically assess if they've learned the vocabulary around activities? Is that something that you do at the end of the month or at the end of the unit or at some point?
So I'm doing these little vocabulary quiz. It's just sort of ongoing where but it's not it's a French to English vocab quiz. So it's more of a recognition. But my goal is not so much that they learn so many vocabulary words, is that they learn the vocabulary words that are necessary for them. So they're not all, the ice skater is going to have different words that she wants to learn to the swimmer or to the skier and surfer. Because those words make more sense to them. And the goal is really that if, and this is based on ACTFL, the national standards, is the goal is not that they'll know, 20 words. The goal is that they will be able to have a conversation or speak or understand about people's activities. And so it can be anything, really. So if it's an ice skater and she wants to talk about her ice skating, she doesn't need to know about mountain climbing vocabulary words necessarily. So, but if she's able to communicate about what is interesting to her and understand some of the really basic ones like skiing and swimming and reading and writing, drawing, listening to music, but there's no kind of set list. Does that make sense? So the assessment is, can you speak or can you write or can you understand when someone, can you speak or write about your activities or someone else's activities, or can you understand when somebody talks or when you read about activities?
Got it. Okay, so you're assessing them. It sounds like differentiation, which it sounds like what it is, intentionally differentiating based on their activities or interests, based on interests. Right. And so the speaking, the writing, the understanding, how do you know that they're able to speak? Based on what you saw in class today, or based on something that's going to come up in the future? And likewise for writing. Okay. Just for those two. So what's kind of your plan to see where they're at when it comes to their speaking and their writing?
Okay, so when I do a formative assessment, we usually use the computers and they record themselves speaking. And there's kind of two formats for speaking. They'll do the sort of spontaneous speaking in a conversation. And usually what I try to do is have a conversation with them one-on-one myself while we record. So the other kids will be busy doing something else. And I'll ask questions. And then the other format is more of a presentational, which is where they can sort of prepare something, maybe memorize, maybe not memorize, but, be able to speak maybe from some bullet points and speak. And what I'm looking for is, can they speak in short sentences? This is level 1, so I'm not looking for paragraph length speech. I'm looking for phrases and sentences, simple. I'm not even looking for complex sentences, just simple sentences, but can they get their point across? And so they can do that orally on a computer. I don't do, in 1A, I don't do presentations in front of the class. It's really, I think it really raises the effective filter for this level and this age. So if they can just do it with the computer, they're much more likely to do it in front of the class. it's hard. And some kids have had French before. Some kids have French-speaking parents, so their accents are better, and they're very, very self-conscious about that. So in 1B, I do have them do it more second semester just because they'll have to do it at the high school. So, but I try not to put them on the spot. It's really they speak when, they volunteer to speak, and then I push them a little to do a sentence, or, I push just gently, hopefully.
Yeah. No, it's clear that there's a safe feeling in the class. Everybody feels really safe with expressing themselves, and they know it's okay to make mistakes. And I definitely got a sense of that because of the amount of participation and engagement in the class. So yeah,
Thank you.
That works. You do that really skillfully. Nice job, Madame Modica.
Merci.
I did want to follow up on a concern that you wanted me to focus on in the beginning, which was the level of sort of getting maybe excited or sort of off topic when it comes to building the character and going sort of in too many directions. How do you feel you did with that concern today?
Well, so what happened today was the whole, the boys get to name the character, and this big, there's kind of been this boy versus girls sort of dynamic in this particular class, and the girls tend to dominate. There's more of them, and there's some big personalities, so one boy reminded me that last semester I had said the boys could name it next time, and I had forgotten that, and so we kind of got into this thing, and when things like that happen, or when somebody picks a detail and then the class is not and they argue, or they I get a little like stressed because we're moving away from French, and sometimes what will happen is a student will give us a suggestion, but they, I try to make them just give the next step of the suggestion. So it's a boy or it's a girl or it's, but they always have to, they want to give their full thought out idea. Like, it's a shark without a head who lives in, this, and then he falls in love, and that makes it that student created character, not a class created character. And so it's hard to, I struggle with, one, staying in French, two, making sure that everybody gets a voice and not just the kids that come up with these clever ideas. And so that's where, so today I got a little off with the whole naming thing because they wanted the boys to name it. And so that kind of threw me off a little. So I moved to, I have a new job now, which is a stick picker. And they love that job. And so I went to that to kind of take it off of me. That's the thing. I try to take it off of me as much as possible. So he picked sticks, and then we just went with that. So
okay. How do you think that went?
I think that was okay. I think they see, there was some grumbling, but I think, they accepted it. So yeah, we're going to go with that.
When I saw that process and I was really trying to figure out what would help, I started thinking about a democracy. And thinking about, in a democracy, there's a vote and a direct vote. Everybody puts a vote in. And let's say you have, 51% of the group who votes one way and they get their way. And then that means you have 49% of the class unhappy.
Right.
49% of the electorate unhappy. So is it okay that maybe just under half the class, say, is unhappy with the decision? And so when you give kids a voice like that, you're not going to make everybody happy, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So is your goal, what is your goal in terms of a level of satisfaction with the character, say?
Well, it's really important to me that they own the character, that the class has pride in the character, and that they relate to the character because it's their character. That's important. And also thinking about the democracy, I mean, I try to switch it up. So some things they get to vote on. So what kind of character we have was a vote. Other times I have my prof number 2 pick from suggestions of the class. Sometimes now I'm starting to do the stick. So I'm okay if they're not happy, but I don't want to always do the vote or always do the stick or always do prof number 2. I feel like they're more willing to accept it. And then sometimes I just say no. And I pick, and I have a sign that says Madame Modica is always right. And so sometimes I just pick it. And and I try when I do that to infuse humor into it so that it's not that it's a bitter pill to swallow, but they'll accept it a little more easily if I'm being funny about it. So I find also that I kind of keep them on their toes when they don't really know how the decision's going to be made. So that, I guess, I don't know, does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
So it sounds like it's sometimes a mix of strategies that you use in order to get them to go along with the end result.
Right. And it won't always be the same kids who don't get their way. Because that's what I struggle with, right? So the two girls with the snakes and the rat are excellent students, lovely, love those girls, right? But they will take over the entire class. They will like come in and run the class if I like them. And so, and I'm, I think every teacher is drawn to kids like that, and they're easy to hear and easy to give more because they're good kids. And so I have to really try not to always have them get their way and let the quieter kids get their way sometimes. And some kids don't care, which is great. But so that's my struggle, right? Is I don't want anybody to think anybody's my pet or.
Right. Yeah. Makes sense. I thought about a couple of ways to get those kids' voices come out. And I started thinking of maybe pairing and doing a pairing of kids. So these are just some suggestions that came to my mind that you might want to consider. So before kids kind of shout out, say, for example, the name, they would talk to a partner and maybe pair up and say, well, here's some names I was thinking, or a group of 4 kids coming up with one name and then sharing that name out. And what that might do is that they've had a chance, say 4 or 5 kids, maybe a chance to vet their name with a small group, and then that might mean less names on the board.
Right.
Something to consider.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
How do you think that? What other ways could you use in order to get everybody's voice out? Because I think that that's a really important feature to this, is to have the quiet kids, the introverts, have a chance to share their perspectives as long with voting, but also sharing out their ideas.
Right.
Initially. Yeah,
no, I think that's a really good idea because that's one of my things. There are a couple kids whose voice I never hear unless I call on them, and then they often won't answer. And so that's actually a really good idea. I think that's a good one to do. Have them talk to each other and then report out, maybe 4 kids at a time. Because they might say something in a small group. They might not necessarily. I don't know what else to do. That's a tough one for me.
Right.
And I'm very concerned about the affective filter. So I think that's why I don't push myself on that too much, because I know how hard it can be to be a teenager learning a language. And so I don't want to force kids to talk before they're ready or to, so I struggle with that. And I know I should do more to get those quiet kids' voices in the room. But then I also don't want to freak them out.
Right. So, but in this small group, they'd be speaking in English.
Exactly.
And then it's small group, so they have a chance to be heard. And
I'm going to try that.
5 other kids. So something to try.
Yeah. I think that's a great idea. If you have any other ideas, love to hear it.
Absolutely. So that's the end of my sort of part. I wanted to see if you have any questions for me about this process, about next steps, about anything in general.
So do you think that, so tomorrow we're going to take the story and continue. So I'm going to try some of these things you suggested. Do you think the class is a little chaotic?
What do you mean?
Does it feel like the kids are getting a lot of French from me?
So there's 2 different questions.
Okay.
I don't feel like the class is chaotic at all. I feel like there's an order to the class. The kids know what to do. They know when to do it, and you just need to say one thing, and they know so there's I don't see chaos at all. No, the second question.
Yeah.
What?
So I guess I worry. I'm speaking a lot of French, and I don't know if they're all catching what I'm saying, and I don't know if I'm giving I worry that they're not going to be ready for the next level.
For 1B
next year? Or level 2. But
so your concern is that you spend most of the period speaking French.
Yeah.
I mean, if I were to give you a percentage, I would probably say you spend about 80%, 85% of the period was in French.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like they're hearing enough French
Okay.
during the class. I mean, you can't give them 100% French.
Right.
So the amount of French that you're presenting is adequate. Now the second question is, are they learning it? Are they getting it? Well, that's sort of where the assessments come in, I feel
Right,
like,
right.
and frequent assessments, as you do a lot of formative and you do some summative assessments as well.
Right.
So I would use those as your gauge.
Yeah.
But teaching a new language, as teaching any subject, it's always kind of a field of, there's always a sense of doubt that you have, because
Right.
teaching and reaching every student is a tall order. It's
Right.
a tall order. So that's why we have to rely on the assessments and objective.
Yeah.
Results, not kind of always our feeling, because sometimes we doubt ourselves more than we need to.
Right.
So
Good point.
I would really rely on sort of the outcomes that you see and their writings, their
Right.
the things that you can actually see
Right.
objectively.
Right.
So yeah,
Fair
but you're
enough.
doing a great job.